The day June returned from China, something was off. The air around her felt colder, her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her words were fewer. I tried to brush it off as jet lag, but deep down, I knew something had changed. 2 days later, she asked for the talk. That's when my world started to crumble. She confessed to an emotional affair with someone she met in China. I felt the ground slip beneath my feet. This couldn't be happening. Not after 16 years, not to us. In the weeks that followed, I tried everything to change her mind. Late night talks, promises of new beginnings, but it was like talking to a wall. She had made up her mind. She wanted to leave, to go live with this other man in China. Our son and I were just supposed to adjust to this new reality. It was agreed, somewhat amicably, that she would move out. But fate had other plans. Her arrangement to stay at a friend's fell through. So, I did the only thing I thought would help. I moved out, suggesting we treat it as a trial separation. Maybe, just maybe, the distance would bring her back to me. August ended with me moving back into our home. But nothing had changed. June was as determined as ever to leave. She started looking for places to rent, a clear sign she wasn't coming back. Then, out of nowhere, she broke down. She couldn't go through with renting a new place. Her resolve was crumbling. She started drinking more, and I noticed cuts on her arms. She was self-harming. Despite everything, I couldn't leave her like that. I took care of her, and for a brief moment, we reconnected. She even suggested we try again, but first, she had to sort out her mess in China. I was reluctant, but she had already booked her flight. September rolled around, and communication during her China trip was sporadic at best. When I pressed her about the other man, she evaded, saying we'd talk when she got back. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. Then came the call that shattered me. She admitted to a full-blown physical affair. I felt betrayed on a level one didn't know existed. When she returned, I couldn't even look at her. We agreed she needed to move out, but decided to wait until after my planned vacation in November, for our son's sake. During my trip, she found another place but again couldn't go through with it. The second breakdown hit her harder. She started smoking again, drinking more. Her plan was to get signed off work for 3 months and go back to China. I was beyond caring at this point. Christmas and New Year's passed, and we still hadn't filed for divorce. That's when she hit rock bottom. Self-harming, suicidal, the works. It got worse when I mentioned I met someone over New Year's. She denied it was because of that, but I could tell. Now, she was begging me to take her back. She seemed genuinely remorseful, and a part of me felt relieved at the thought of not having to worry about finances or childcare. But could I really forget the betrayal? Her pleas were constant, her eyes always brimming with tears. She was a shadow of the woman I married, lost in a sea of her own making. But every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal, the lies. Forgiving her felt like an impossible mountain to climb. I watched as she deteriorated before my eyes. The drinking worsened, the self-harm became more frequent. I was torn between anger and a sense of responsibility. This was the mother of my child, once the love of my life. Yet, she had thrown it all away for a fleeting romance. The final straw came when she had another breakdown. It was worse this time. She was inconsolable, mumbling apologies, her words slurred from alcohol. I realized then that this wasn't just about us anymore. She was a danger to herself. I made arrangements for her to stay with a friend temporarily. She needed help, more than I could give. I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt as I watched her leave, her steps uncertain, her future even more so. The following weeks were a blur. I focused on our son, trying to give him some sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. He was confused, hurt, and I had no answers for him. How do you explain to a child that the person they idolized is no longer the hero they thought they were? Our divorce proceedings began in earnest. It was a painful, drawn-out process, filled with legal jargon and cold, emotionless negotiations. I wanted it over, to close this chapter of our lives and start anew. But fate had one more cruel twist. June's mental health spiraled out of control. She was hospitalized after a severe episode. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching her hooked up to machines, a part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her. But another part of me recoiled, remembering the pain she caused. The divorce was finalized quietly. There was no fanfare, no sense of victory. Just a profound sense of loss. I had lost the woman I loved. My son had lost the mother he adored, and in her quest for something more, June had lost everything. As I narrate this story, I realized the lesson isn't just about the consequences of infidelity. It's about the fragility of the human heart, the complexity of emotions, and the irreversible damage that one decision can cause. June's journey from a loving wife to a broken woman is a stark reminder of the ripple effect of our choices. I often wonder if things could have been different, if there was a moment where I could have steered us back on course. But some paths, once taken, lead to destinations from which there is no return. As I rebuild my life with my son, I hold on to the hope that out of the ashes of our broken past, we can rise stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Our story isn't one of happy endings, but it is one of growth, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Hey everyone, I hope you're as engrossed in this story as I am in sharing it with you. If you're finding this journey as compelling as I do, don't forget to hit that like button down below. It really helps the channel and lets me know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. This way, you won't miss out on the rest of this story or any of the other incredible tales we have lined up. Your support means the world to me, and it's what keeps this channel going. Thanks for being part of our community, and I'll see you in the next video. In the wake of June's first breakdown, something shifted between us. I found myself supporting her through her crisis, our relationship entering a strange, fragile state of closeness. She was vulnerable, and despite everything, I couldn't help but be there for her. As we navigated this confusing time, June dropped a bombshell. She suggested we try again. But there was a catch: she had planned another trip to China. To sort things out, she said. My gut twisted at the thought. Another trip? After everything that had happened? My reservations about her trip were like a gnawing beast in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. She assured me it was just to end things properly with the other man, but the trust between us was a shattered mirror impossible to fully restore. Then came the days of her trip. Communication was sporadic and cold. I felt like I was talking to a stranger. The person on the other end of those messages wasn't the June I knew. My anxiety ramped up with each passing day of silence. The call that broke me came out of the blue. She admitted to a physical affair. Her words were like daggers, each one a brutal betrayal of our years together. I was shattered, numb with pain. The woman I loved, the mother of my son, had crossed a line we could never uncross. When she returned, the air between us was thick with unspoken words and shattered trust. The decision was made: she needed to move out. We agreed to wait until after my vacation for our son Sake, but it was a temporary band-aid over a gaping wound. In a twist of fate, she found a rental but hesitated at the last minute. It was like watching someone standing at the edge of a cliff, unable to jump. This hesitation led to her second breakdown. I watched as she started smoking again, her stress levels skyrocketing. The woman before me was crumbling under the weight of her decisions. In a desperate attempt to find herself, she announced plans for a longer stay in China. For self-improvement, she said. It was hard to believe anything that came out of her mouth by then. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell her to just go and never come back. But there was another part, a quieter, sadder part, that mourned the loss of the life we had built together. As she prepared for her trip, our house became a silent battlefield, every conversation a potential minefield. We were two strangers, coexisting in a space that once held love, laughter, and dreams. The day she left for China, I felt a complex mix of relief and despair. Relief that the source of my pain was gone, despair at the thought of what our lives had become. I was left alone with my thoughts, my son's confused questions, and the remnants of a life that no longer existed. In her absence, the house felt emptier than ever. I struggled with the daily routine, each task a reminder of her betrayal. I found myself staring at the places she used to sit, the silence deafening in her absence. Her trip dragged on, and the communication gaps grew wider. I was left in the dark, the uncertainty gnawing at me. Every day was a battle, trying to maintain normalcy for our son while inside, I was a storm of emotions. Then, out of nowhere, she called. Her voice was different, strained, as if she was holding back a flood of emotions. She talked about her time in China, how she was trying to find herself again. But her words felt hollow, rehearsed. I could barely respond, the anger and hurt choking my words. Our conversations became a twisted dance, her trying to explain, me trying to understand. But how do you understand betrayal? How do you rationalize the breaking of a sacred bond? The weeks dragged on, each day a test of endurance. I threw myself into work, into caring for our son, anything to keep my mind off her. But at night, when the house was quiet, the reality of our situation would crash over me like a wave. She eventually returned from China, but she was a shadow of the woman I married. Her eyes had lost their sparkle, her laughter replaced by silence. She talked about her experiences, how she had changed. But the gap between us had grown too wide. We agreed to continue with the plan for her to move out. She found another rental, but again hesitated. It was as if she was torn between two worlds, unable to decide where she belonged. Her indecision led to her second major breakdown. I found her one evening, curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The sight of her so broken, so lost, stirred something in me. Despite everything, I couldn't turn my back on her. I helped her up, listened as she poured out her fears and doubts. She was terrified of the future, of being alone. She talked about her regrets, her wish to turn back time. But some things, once broken, can't be mended. As the days passed, her mental state deteriorated. She was a mess of anxiety and depression, smoking like a chimney, her health declining. I watched helplessly as she spiraled further down. In a last-ditch effort to find herself, she announced another longer trip to China. This time, it felt like a final goodbye. She talked about needing space, about healing away from the reminders of her mistakes. The day she left for China, there were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes. Just a silent acknowledgement of the end of an era. I watched her walk away, a suitcase in hand, a world of regrets trailing behind her. In her absence, I was left to pick up the pieces. Our son asked about her constantly, his innocent questions like daggers to my heart. I did my best to explain, to reassure him, but how do you explain the inexplicable? The house felt like a mausoleum, a monument to a love that once was. I moved through the days mechanically, each task a reminder of her absence. I found myself avoiding the places she used to frequent, the memories too painful to bear. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of our situation set in. We were no longer a family, just fragments of a life that used to be. I started the process of moving on, of building a new life for me and our son. But the scars of her betrayal ran deep, a constant reminder of the cost of trust broken. The chapter of our life together was closing, a story of love turned to ashes. I focused on our son, on giving him the stability and love he needed. But in the quiet moments, when he was asleep, the weight of our shattered dreams would settle on my shoulders, a heavy, unyielding burden. As I navigated this new reality, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey we had taken. From love to betrayal, from trust to heartbreak. The path we had walked was littered with broken promises and shattered expectations. The finality of her moving out loomed over us, an inevitable end to a chapter we had written together. The day she finally gathered her things, the air was thick with unsaid words. She moved around the house, collecting her belongings, each item a piece of our shared history. I watched from a distance, a spectator in the dismantling of our life. Her movements were slow, hesitant, as if she was trying to memorize every corner, every shadow. When she was done, she stood in the doorway, a suitcase in hand, her eyes searching mine for something, forgiveness, perhaps, or a sign of the love we once shared. But all I could offer was a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the end. She left without a word, the door closing behind her with a soft click, a final punctuation to the sentence of our marriage. In the aftermath of her departure, the house felt emptier than ever. I wandered through the rooms, each one echoing with the ghosts of our past. I found myself touching the things she had left behind, a book, a scarf, as if trying to hold on to a piece of her. But as the days passed, the pain began to dull, the memories fading into the background. I focused on rebuilding, on creating a new life for me and my son. We talked about her sometimes, in quiet moments, remembering the good times, acknowledging the bad. The process of healing was slow, a journey of small steps and big leaps. I learned to forgive, not for her, but for me, for my peace of mind. I learned to let go, to release the anger and the hurt that had held me captive. As I narrate this story, I realize the lessons it holds. The importance of trust, the fragility of love, the strength of forgiveness. Our story may not have had a happy ending, but it taught me the value of resilience, of standing up after being knocked down. And as I move forward, with my son by my side, I hold on to the hope of a better tomorrow, a future built on the lessons of the past. Our story is not one of fairy tales, but of reality, of the highs and lows of love and life. The holidays were a blur of artificial cheer and forced smiles. We hadn't started divorce proceedings yet, a fact that hung over us like a dark cloud. I was done waiting, my indifference a shield against further hurt. Then came the night of her third breakdown. It was worse than before, her sobs cutting through the silent house. She had harmed herself again, her arms a map of her pain. I found her on the bathroom floor, a broken figure lost in her despair. The tension between us escalated when I mentioned meeting someone new. It wasn't serious, just a fleeting connection, but the effect on her was like a lit match to dry grass. Her reaction was a mix of anger, pain, and desperation. Her pleas for another chance became a daily ritual. She was remorseful, her apologies a constant echo in our conversations. But my heart was a fortress, sealed against her words. I was torn between forgiveness and betrayal. Part of me longed for the comfort of the past, the other part recoiled at the thought of forgetting her transgressions. It was a battle waged within the confines of my mind, with no clear victor. Her mental state worsened, the depth of her depression a dark chasm that seemed to have no end. I heard about her struggles from mutual friends, their words painting a picture of a woman on the edge. Her attempts to reconcile became more desperate. She wrote letters, sent texts, left voicemails, each one a plea for redemption. But the scars she had left were too deep, too raw to ignore. The pressure from society to forgive was another burden. Friends, family, even strangers seemed to have an opinion on what I should do. Forgive and forget, they said, as if it were that simple. But how do you forgive the unforgivable? Her emotional pleas spilled out into public. She confronted me at work, at the grocery store, her tears and words an embarrassing spectacle. I felt trapped, her presence a constant reminder of the past I was trying to escape. The bombshell hit without warning. June's infidelity had become the talk of the town. Whispers and stares followed me wherever I went, the weight of public scrutiny heavy on my shoulders. It was a scandal that spread like wildfire, a story feasted upon by gossip-hungry onlookers. In the midst of this chaos, June lost her job. Her behavior, once erratic, had spiraled out of control, and her professional life crumbled under the weight of her personal choices. It was a hard fall from grace for a woman who had once been so respected in her field. Her social circle, once a tight-knit group of friends and confidants, slowly disintegrated. One by one, they distanced themselves, unwilling or unable to stand by her side. It was a painful exodus to watch, each departure a further blow to her already fragile state. Back in China, her family, whom I had come to know and respect over the years, disowned her. The news came in terse messages, filled with shame and disappointment. The cultural stigma, the loss of face, was too much for them to bear. June was now adrift, without the anchor of her family's support. Financial troubles soon followed. Without a job and with dwindling savings, she struggled to keep afloat. The life she had known, filled with comforts and security, was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Amidst all this, I found an unexpected well of support within my own social circle. Friends reached out, offering words of encouragement, their gestures a balm to the raw wounds of betrayal. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are lights that refuse to be extinguished. June's mental and physical health took a nosedive. The vibrant woman I once knew was now a shell, her body and spirit worn down by the turmoil of her own making. It was a descent that was painful to witness, a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. I struggled with guilt over her condition. Despite everything, she was still the mother of my child, a woman I had once promised to love and cherish. Her decline stirred a complex mix of emotions within me: anger, pity, remorse. In a desperate attempt to salvage some semblance of her former life, June reached out to her affair partner. But it was a bridge burned beyond repair. He wanted nothing to do with her, his rejection a public humiliation that added insult to injury. The rejection hit her hard. She was lost, her last hope of happiness slipping through her fingers. I watched from a distance as she grappled with the harsh reality of her situation, her dreams shattered, her future uncertain. The days turned into weeks, each passing moment a testament to the consequences of her actions. June was a woman unmoored, her life a series of cascading failures. Her attempts to rebuild bridges were met with cold shoulders and closed doors. It was during this time that the affair partner made his stance painfully clear. In a public confrontation that turned heads, he openly rejected and humiliated her. The scene was a spectacle of despair and humiliation, drawing both pity and scorn from onlookers. I witnessed it from afar, the drama unfolding like a scene from a tragic play. There she stood, a figure of defeat, her pleas falling on deaf ears. The man she had risked everything for turned. The storm of our private life had broken into the public domain. The whispers and sideways glances confirmed that our once private pain was now community gossip. The infidelity that tore our family apart was no longer just ours to bear. June's world was unraveling faster than a spool of thread. She lost her job amidst the scandal, her erratic behavior the final nail in her professional coffin. Watching from the sidelines, I saw the woman who had once held her head high now reduced to a shadow of her former self. Isolation followed her like a dark cloud. Friends who once filled our home with laughter now crossed the street to avoid her. Her social circle, which had been a source of joy and support, crumbled away, leaving her more alone than ever. Then came the news that hit her like a ton of bricks: her family in China had disowned her. The shame of her actions, magnified by cultural expectations, had severed the ties that bound her to her roots. She was a pariah in her own community, an outcast in her family. Financial struggles soon followed. Without a job and with dwindling savings, June faced the harsh reality of her decisions. The lifestyle she had known, the comforts she had taken for granted, slipped away like sand through her fingers. Amidst her spiraling life, I found an unexpected solace in my own social circle. Friends and colleagues rallied around me, their words a balm to the open wounds of betrayal. It was a stark contrast to June's desolation. Her mental and physical health deteriorated in tandem. The vibrant woman I had married was now a frail figure, her body bearing the brunt of her mental anguish. Guilt gnawed at me for all the pain between us. I never wished her harm. The final blow came when she tried to reconnect with her affair partner, the man for whom she had risked everything. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. He rejected her, publicly and mercilessly. The humiliation was complete, a spectacle for all to see. June's life, once so full of promise, had spiraled into chaos. Her health, both mental and physical, was a shadow of what it once was. Watching from a distance, I was torn between relief that it was no longer my circus and a deep-seated guilt for the role I played in her downfall. The news of her attempted reconciliation with the affair partner and his brutal rejection spread like wildfire. People I barely knew approached me with a mix of sympathy and morbid curiosity. The drama of our lives was better than any soap opera, it seemed. June's predicament was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. She was now a pariah, ostracized by those she once considered friends, abandoned by family, and scorned by her lover. As her estranged husband, I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The support from my friends was heartening, but it couldn't completely erase the guilt that lingered in the back of my mind. Was I partly to blame for her current state? Could I have done something different? But the reality was that June's choices had led her down this path. Her decisions, driven by a fleeting passion, had cost her everything. Her job, her reputation, her social standing all gone. I watched as she struggled to come to terms with her new reality. Her attempts to rebuild her life were met with closed doors and turned backs. The community we had once been a part of had turned its back on her, the judgment in their eyes clear as day. Her physical health was the next casualty in this saga. The stress and depression took a visible toll on her, her once vibrant appearance now dull and lifeless. It pained me to see her like this, but I was helpless to do anything. The saga of our broken marriage was a cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and the consequences of our actions. It was a reminder that the choices we make can have far-reaching effects, impacting not just our lives but those around us. As I navigated this new chapter of my life, I was constantly reminded of the tumultuous journey that had brought me here. The support of my friends was a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the memories or the pain. June's descent into despair was a stark contrast to the life we had once envisioned. It was a tragic end to a story that had started with so much promise. Her fall from grace was a painful reminder of how quickly life could change, how the choices we make can lead us down paths we never intended to walk. The community's reaction to our saga was a mix of pity, scorn, and a morbid fascination. I was the wronged husband, the victim of a wayward wife's actions. But the sympathy felt hollow, a reminder of the loss we had both suffered. In the end, our story was one of lost love, broken promises, and the consequences of betrayal. It was a tale that resonated with many, a cautionary reminder of the fragility of relationships and the destructive power of infidelity. As I rebuilt my life, Piece by piece, I often wondered about June. Where was she now? How was she coping with the aftermath of her decisions? The once vibrant, confident woman I had married was now a ghost, a reminder of a past life that was no longer mine. The journey we had embarked on together had ended in ruins, a testament to the unpredictable nature of life. But in its wake, it left lessons about trust, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to move on. Our story, though marred by pain and betrayal, was a chapter in the book of life. A chapter that had ended, allowing for a new beginning, a fresh start. And as I turned the page, I carried with me the lessons learned, the scars healed, and the hope for a better tomorrow. Life, it seemed, had no intention of slowing down its relentless march. While June grappled with the consequences of her actions, my own life was taking a different turn. My new relationship, unexpected and gentle, began to bloom amidst the ruins of my past. June, meanwhile, faced a harsh reality. Financial instability, a direct result of her impulsive decisions, led to the threat of eviction. Watching from a distance, I saw the news hit her like a physical blow. The once proud and confident woman I knew was now on the brink of losing everything. In a desperate bid to sustain herself, she resorted to drastic measures. It pained me to hear of the lengths she was going to just to keep a roof over her head. Rumors and gossip about her actions spread through the community like wildfire, each tale more sensational than the last. Her health, already fragile, reached a critical point. News of her hospitalization reached me through hushed whispers and concerned glances. Despite everything, a part of me ached at the thought of her suffering alone. Amidst the whirlwind of my evolving life, I found myself at a crossroads. The conflict of whether to help my ex-wife, the mother of my child, weighed heavily on me. It was a battle between my sense of duty and the scars of betrayal. June's last-ditch effort to win back her family was heart-wrenching. She reached out, her pleas filled with desperation and remorse. But the chasm between us was too wide, the damage too deep. I stood at the precipice of a decision that would define my future. The weight of the choice was immense, a balancing act between the past and the possibility of a new beginning. The conclusion of June's story was a stark reminder of the consequences of choices. Her downfall, a direct result of her actions, was a tragic end to a tale that had begun with so much promise. As I reflected on the journey, the lessons learned were clear and harsh. The consequences of infidelity, the fragility of trust, and the strength required to rebuild from the ashes of betrayal were starkly evident. In the end, the story was not just about the end of a marriage, but about the resilience of the human spirit, the complexities of relationships, and the often harsh realities of life's choices. June's eviction became a reality, a final blow in a series of misfortunes. I heard about her moving out, the last remnants of her life packed into boxes, a visual metaphor for the disintegration of her world. As I navigated my new relationship, the contrast between my life and June's couldn't have been starker. Where my life was gaining color and warmth, hers was descending into bleakness. My new partner brought stability and a quiet joy, a stark contrast to the tumultuous years with June. The community's whispers about June turned into loud chatter. Tales of her struggles were recounted with a mix of pity and morbid fascination. The woman who had once been a part of our social fabric was now a cautionary tale, a subject of town gossip. Her health deteriorated rapidly, hospital visits became frequent, and I received updates from mutual acquaintances. The vibrant woman I had once known was now fighting a battle against her own body, a struggle that seemed increasingly futile. The conflict within me grew. Despite the pain and betrayal, she was still the mother of my child, a woman I had once loved deeply. But the wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep for me to cross the chasm that lay between us. Her attempt to reconnect with our family was a scene of desperation. She stood on our doorstep one evening, a shadow of her former self, pleading for a chance to be part of our lives again. It was a moment of intense emotion, a clash of past love and present reality. My decision about the future was one of the hardest I've ever had to make. I chose to move forward, to embrace the potential of a new life, a decision that meant closing the door on the past, on June. Her downfall was a result of a series of choices, each one leading her further down a path of destruction. The consequences of her actions were now her reality, a life vastly different from the one she had envisioned. As the chapter of our lives together closed, I reflected on the journey. The pain, the betrayal, and the eventual healing taught me about the complexity of love and the harsh realities of life. The story was a testament to the consequences of infidelity, a reminder of the fragility of trust, and the resilience required to move on. In the end, the narrative of our lives was a blend of joy and sorrow, love and loss, a reminder that the choices we make have far-reaching consequences. It was a story of coming to terms with the past and embracing the future, a journey of healing and newfound